Hello, everybody. This is my recording on Dexter Season 4, the main theme being about family. Alright, so let's start with episode 1. Episode 1 and 2 seem to have the most notes. Um, Season 4 has the theme of family, but also cycles. So let's start with episode 1. My first note is about Dexter having a new baby and losing sleep. Yeah, when you have a new baby, the idea of a baby is going to sound great and everything, and there's a child in the house, but you will lose a lot of sleep, and you will still be expected to function throughout your day. So just know that if you have a baby, if sleep is something you cherish or need, you are not going to have it, and it will drive you crazy. Also, with kids, once they start getting older, like with Aster and Cody in this episode, Aster gets to an age where she starts talking back. Teenagers, young people trying to find who they are in life, and when they feel comfortable enough to do it, then they'll start to be more aggressive with their vocabulary. And certain households they don't like that. They don't tolerate that. They're like, "Oh no, this kid is talking back. It's time to shut this kid down." Some households do that. Some households understand that this kid is young and this kid needs a little wiggle room to feel safe enough to express what it is that they're feeling. Um, Either way, you just got to work with what you got. You just got to do the best you can. Um, with me, I was not allowed to express myself in such a way. And ultimately, that did hurt me in my development as I got older because I was never given the space to fully express how I felt and fully express just myself verbally. I was always expected to, but whenever I did, there was always some kind of consequence. Um, because of the tone of my voice when I was younger, um, I would be yelled at, and I was told that I was talking back. Just because I had a very bassy voice when I was younger. So because of that, as I started to get older, I softened my voice and had to learn how to take some of the bass out of it. So as I got older, I actually lost some of the bass in my voice because of how I didn't have the space to verbally express myself the way I wanted to. Um, for those who were wanting kids or going in that area, I just wanted to give my personal experience, in that regards. Cody is doing random things, yeah, when children have a healthy upbringing or whatever. When they feel healthy, then they will experiment and just experiment with themselves and how they feel and just kind of just let it out. With Cody doing random things, it's just this kid feeling free, someone feeling free within themselves and having all this energy. And, once a new variable puts itself in the equation, of course, an individual is going to be like, how far can I take that? So, kids doing random weird things, that is a healthy sign of a child. That is very healthy. As regards to me growing up, I kind of kept that away. Um, I was told something. I'm not going to get into my whole story, but I was told something when I was young, when I expressed myself and I was doing random things. I was, well, I guess I'll say it, but I was told um, that I would be sent to a mental institution. Well, of course, my parent was joking, but at the time, I did not know that. And I really thought that I was going to be sent to a mental asylum when I was a child, and be taken away from my family. So I shut down, and every time I did kind of open up or do something weird and random, my parent would say that joke. And then at some point, I completely shut down and said, I'm going to lose everything and all the people that I love. So, when I was younger, I shut myself down. I stopped being weird. I stopped being energetic. I stopped letting my mind go to those free places. And again, when it came to my development, it reshaped who I am today. To this day, I've never really opened back up because every time I thought that I could have a sense of freedom, I was always met with, I'm going to be sent to the asylum. As I got older, I knew it was a joke. I found out it was a joke. But at that point, I was so used to what I mentally did to cope that it just became a natural thing for me to do. And I never knew how to get out of it. So yeah, just keep that in mind if you're raising a child. So yeah, so that was about Asher talking back, and Cody, if you have kids around that age, I forget how old they were, maybe like 13, 12, or something. All right. Also, when you do have a new family, um you're not going to be able to, you're going to have a work deficiency. You're not going to be able to work as good as you did before. Don't pressure yourself. Don't say, "Oh my gosh, I can't work that." Just know that you're going to be going through a lot of stress, especially with a new baby. It's gonna take some adjusting, whether it's a new baby, a new child, a new, animal that really needs a certain amount of attention. So just know that you are gonna have a deficiency in work, and don't blame yourself too much for that. I do have some notes on some Easter eggs throughout this episode, which was Dexter seeing his past in a different with different eyes, um, with more normal eyes, and then that is seen as Deb looking at the past, um, through the records of Dexter's past. Quinn's character at this point does represent honesty, but also a sense of empathy and a voice of reason. But anyway, now to get back into the main theme I want to talk about, getting calls to calm your child. Yes. So there will be times when you get phone calls and you will need to do something to attend to your child or your baby or your children, your chitlins, your chickens. Um, I see it all the time. I experience it all the time. When someone, my coworker or someone, we're just talking, we're at work, then they get a phone call and, it's the other parent. Oh, your daughter did this or your son did this, and you need to have a word with them. And you'll get random phone calls like that where you'll be at work or you'll be busy, then you'll get a phone call and you will have to say something or attend to your children over the phone, or even say something that'll put them in line because they are fighting at home and they're not listening to parent A or parent B. So you, as parent A, have to get on the phone, talk with the kids, and regulate and tell them what needs to be said. Just know that is normal once you have kids. Okay, so here's another off Easter egg or uh, thing about the show. The idea of Batista and LaGuerta, the relationship there is the fact that Dexter is trying to put together his sense of authority and his sense of righteousness, trying to make his authority and his righteousness be the main motivator for how he gets through, for how he goes through life now and how he makes his decisions. The idea of his righteousness to his family and his authority and how he presents himself and how he makes decisions for himself and for his family. Um, trying to really bring those together into a matrimony, or is represented in the characters of LaGuerta and Angel. And so their relationship actually symbolizes Dexter trying to do what's right for his family and stand by the idea of his family. Yeah, so I wrote that down in my notes as a little reference to the show. Lundy coming back is like a relic of the past, but Lundy coming back also means that he brings, remanifests the idea of cycles and the past, and bringing the past back into the present. So, with Lundy being a relic of the past, he brings those two with him, cycles and the past. Um, so yeah, so Lundy represents that, and Christine, she is more of a young girl who has father issues, basically, and she is more connected to Deb's story. Christina is the symbolism of Dexter's human side having Dexter's young human side having father issues, but that is being told through Deb's storyline. All right, now to move on to episode 2 of season 4, Maria LaGuerta's hair. Maria LaGuerta's hair being down versus being up symbolizes the internal struggle that Dexter has in his mind of reverting to his primal self or evolving into the person he needs to be for his family. So, trying to understand, does the authority mean that Dexter has to evolve, or is Dexter's authority trying to go back to his primal instinct? The internal struggle that Dexter has with trying to figure that out and figure out where his place is for his authority, um, is that story is being told through LaGuerta and her hair. Um, so our primal selves and our unresolved situations can cause history to repeat itself. So if there is something that we haven't made peace with, or something that we avoid, something we just haven't had closure with, or if we're just stuck in a certain cycle, stuck acting a certain way, well, if we don't have a peaceful resolution to certain situations or patterns in our life, then they will end up remanifesting over and over again. This is especially true when it comes to family. And if someone's of the opposite, if there was a man and if there was a guy and his mother treated him bad in a certain way, then he'll most likely attract females who are a reflection of his mother. And same thing, a woman will attract males that were just like her father and how her father treated her. Just things like that. Personal unresolved issues. Whenever we have children, our children will end up taking on the burden and unresolved issues of both the parents, creating karmic cycles. But I think when I wrote this note down, it was mainly to talk about if we are in a relationship or with a family, with a wife, or with our family, then if we don't resolve issues, they will just resurface, and that will overall affect the household that we're in with others. And when that happens, sometimes these negative, unresolved things that happen can affect new things that come into our lives, or new people that come into our lives. There could be great things, great blessings that come into our lives, but because we haven't resolved certain issues from the past, they may just come back to the surface, back to the surface, and threaten something beautiful that this new family has to offer. For those who have another, sometimes it is hard to juggle, so many things, but yeah, it's manageable. Having a teenage daughter acting out in front of a cute boy, I don't know how deep I want to really go into that. Yeah, that's normal. It's normal for a girl to be like, "Oh, it's a boy," and I don't want random comments and women being like, "You don't know anything about women or girls." I just don't want to deal with that right now. So, um, to simplify it, just know that it's not natural, for girls to act out a certain way when they're around a boy. Which, of course, sometimes even boys will do that with girls too. Think that they're cool and yeah, just try to act out in front of someone that they like. Just know that that's normal. Don't punish your child for that. It's a normal thing that a child goes through. And yeah, know the difference between raising a boy and raising a girl, such as the pool scene when Cody is thrown in the pool. He's like, oh, and then he laughs about it and moves on. Versus Dexter pushing Aster in the pool, and she gets out, and Rita's like, Dexter, why would you do that? And Aster gets out the pool and grabs a towel. She's like, I'm so humiliated. And she cries and runs off. Just know that you can't treat a boy the same as you would raise a girl. It's just doesn't work that way. They're just wired differently. So just yeah, just keep that in mind that both of them need to be treated differently. Um, I'm not sure if this was the episode where Dexter. Oh no, yeah, this is episode 3 now. Oh yes. Oh, I didn't even realize I was talking about episode 3 the last few minutes. So I'm on episode 3 now, and I guess this is the episode after Dexter's accident. So sometimes your spouse can be very controlling when they need to take care of you. They will be very bossy and they'll be like, hey, you need to do this to take care of yourself. You need to do that to take care of your heart. You know what the doctor said. They're scared and they love you and they care about you and they only want to do what's best for you. And sure, the way that's expressed can seem very annoying and out of place, but they love you at the end of the day and they just want to do whatever they can to make sure you're safe and okay. However, if you are the person that is controlling, it's understandable why you're the way that you are. Just know to keep a handle on it and don't let those feelings control you. Just know that you can kind of control those feelings and not be too, no, forget that. They need help and just kind of let your emotions take over. Just know that you can have a handle on that. So when things need to be communicated in a certain way, if certain needs do need to be met by the person that is hurt. If space is needed, then it's important to be able to have a handle on the emotional part of the situation. So that way, communication can be good and the caretaking can have a very easy, smoother process. And when you do that, both sides will be more willing to talk and be more willing to be more honest. Uh, when you do become a part of a tribe or a community, especially with family, now it starts getting into more primal territory. But it is good to have a family, and it is also good to have a tribe for the family. So that means interacting with the neighbors, getting to know your neighbors, getting to know the people around you, and saying, okay, this is our home. This is our space. This is our block. This is our neighborhood. And it is important that we all know to talk to each other and communicate with each other and know what's going on with one another. We may have kids, and it's important for the kids to know each other, to know whose parent is who. If anything goes on in the neighborhood, then we know who to talk to. We know who to bounce conversations off of to find out the truth when something bad does happen. It is important to be a part of a bigger community, especially when you do have a family. And it is important to know that when you do have a family, there's others who want the best for their family as well. And with that mutual understanding, it's easier to connect with the people around you. And on that level, it makes it easier to create a more healthy community, an understanding community, because when you all have a mutual um, foundation to operate from, then it makes it easier to just grow from there, grow from that foundation of protecting family and things like that. Also, this goes back to the children. Sometimes telling your teenage child, hey, I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm still new to this parent thing. Sometimes that can help your child be more understanding of the fact that you don't mean to embarrass them or hurt them in some way. You just really don't know what to do and you're still learning. And that does create a good bond because when your child is young and they're growing up, they're learning how the world works, and you're learning new things about your child as they're growing up. So now that you both are in unfamiliar territory in your lives, trying to share with your child, hey, I don't really know how to handle this, or what's going on with you. I don't really know how having that. I don't really know what I'm doing creates a stronger bond. Um, yeah, I never really had that with my parents, so from the void that I have, I can attest by saying that I think that is very true. I know that it would be easier for me if I had that kind of a bond. Anyway, at some point you may seem a bit miserable or upset because you have a family, and you may sometimes feel trapped, and you probably will say, "Why am I upset right now? Because I have a person, or I have a spouse, or I have a family, I have people who care about me and who love me, but I'm just so miserable about it." Understand that that is a healthy feeling to have. In a sense, it is. Only because, in a sense, it is. And it's normal. It's normal. When you have a good, healthy foundation, you're like, okay, I got a family here. This family's not going anywhere. This is my life. This is everyday thing. And when you're in that space, you don't think about the horrible, terrible, awful things that could possibly happen. And then you cling on and clench on to your family. You're like, oh my gosh, what if they die? What if this happens? What if this horrible thing happens? Or that horrible thing happens? Like you're not so afraid and scared and traumatized to where you're constantly thinking about that with your family. When you're in a healthy space, you're not thinking about all that. So when you are in a healthy space, then when you start feeling like, oh man, I have a family and they're bothering me, just know that means that what you have is healthy. It means you have healthy feelings. Just know that you're normal for feeling that way. Don't blame yourself for feeling that way. And just know that you love them at the end of the day. You will always love them. They always love you. You're always going to be there. But you may sometimes feel annoyed by them, and that's okay. This was also another Easter egg that I found, or Easter egg or lore, I guess, a piece of something. The showrunner for Dexter left after season 4, and then other showrunners took over. Well, the showrunner who did season 4 actually came back to Dexter during Dexter New Blood. And I did notice that, since it was the same, story guy, um, there was an interesting dynamic between this episode 3. This is the episode when there was the vandalisms going on. And there was an interesting dynamic between Jesse and Andy. Jesse was the kid with the beanie who had the spray paint, and Andy was his dad. During this episode, watching it, I noticed that there was an interesting dynamic between the father and the son relationship, and that relationship remanifested into Dexter New Blood. Now, of course, I did mention that in the TV show Dexter, every character is actually a representation of Dexter's character and what he's going through, and how his ideologies, how his ideas and feelings and thoughts mix with each other, and how his ideas and thoughts and feelings mix with each other is the chemistry of the characters throughout the show. So all the characters throughout the show are actually physically playing out what Dexter's actually going through within himself. So it's almost like the show is happening within his mind, or in a weird dimension, sort of pseudo reality. Um, so the idea of Jesse and Andy actually leaves an open story for Dexter, and that really being creating this weird cycle of father and son, and losing everything, and disappearing, and Dexter I'm sorry, Andy losing his wife, and after he lost his wife, he got upset, and the guilt caused him to, it was just, if you really paid attention to that story, you'll see how there is a seed planted there with Jesse and Andy, and that seed remanifests in Dexter New Blood. So yeah, can't really go into too much detail right now about that, but that was just an interesting little thing, little piece of lore. Um, so yeah, in this episode, Dexter is starting to feel more exposed in so many ways. So whenever Dexter whenever Dexter sees the light of his neighbor, and Dexter breaks that light, that's actually Dexter within his own mind trying to destroy the light within himself, and trying to disconnect from his innocent light side right now, because his darkness feels so exposed that his darkness is just kind of going crazy. So now his darkness wants to fully take over, and Dexter wants to put his light out, because Dexter's light right now is the source of all of his dysfunction and his pain, and his dysfunction and his confusion and his anger, because he's trying so hard to do the right thing and be the best person he can, and that comes from the good side of him, from the innocent side of him. But that is ultimately making him feel inefficient. It's making him feel so many different things. So when Dexter actually breaks that light next door, that's a symbolism of Dexter actually putting his own light out, breaking his own light, and letting his darkness really expose it, really take over. And Dexter's innocent side seeing that is like, oh, or Dexter's innocent side represented by Rita, witnessing that is like, oh, you're upset and you're angry and you're acting out, and you need some time. My bad. But yeah, and the last thing I'll say about this episode is I believe it's something Lindy said, which is when you are a lone wolf, you really don't belong anywhere. You just kind of pass through. There was some other stuff that he said along the lines of being a lone wolf, but yeah, Dexter is basically a lone wolf. But in this season, Dexter is really trying to balance out every part of himself and force together parts of him and his life that really can't mix. They don't mix by nature, and Dexter's trying to make them mix. But yeah, that's there's that. So now moving on to episode 4. All right, episode 4. Dex takes a holiday. I remember the name of that episode 'cause that's my favorite episode of this season. Um, yeah, this is when my pen started to lose its ink, so it's going to be very, very hard to read all the notes from this one episode. So let's see. The first, oops, I'm going to get that close to the mic. The first thing I said was, yeah, taking a vacation to recharge. Dexter's innocence, which is Rita basically, and the kids, or Rita, but yeah, also the kids. They go out on a vacation and give Dexter some personal time to recharge. It is very important to give your spouse or family member time to recharge themselves and recharge their batteries. Otherwise, they're going to feel very overwhelmed about being around the family so much and dealing with all the chaos of the family. And it just creates a lot of stress. And eventually, someone's going to blow up and there's a big problem. So, it is important to allow, once a week, a guy's night out, once a week, a girl's night out, every now and then. Uh, just take a break from the whole family dynamic. So, yeah, it's important to take holidays. Um, in this episode with Rita leaving, that means that allows Dexter's darkness to fully come out, and for Dexter's darkness to fully go on vacation and recharge and process itself, and process the situation and the feelings, and really let Dexter have the space to figure out the truth of what he wants, what he's feeling, what he's going through, and to help him remind himself of what is important when it comes to this family. Um, so the next piece, I can barely read it, but I think what it says is keeping a relationship secret versus telling everybody. Um, yeah, well, being in a relationship, and if you want to keep it secret, that's good. You don't want to really, and sometimes a spouse or somebody can feel like, oh, we should probably tell everybody. We should be honest. We should tell everybody about what's going on. And there's some people who are like, no, we don't need to tell anybody. What this is between us is so sacred that the rest of the world doesn't need to know what it is. I like this little bubble that is just us. And these parts of us that are invested into this bubble that keep us happy in life. We have our own lives going on, but there's this sacred bubble that holds important pieces of each of us inside of it, and that is what really holds us together and makes our relationship so beautiful. We don't need any other eyes looking at us, looking at our bubbles. We don't need anybody saying anything. We don't need any outside energy influencing this sacred bubble that we have. um that is basically, um that was Batista's look on the situation of, of when you're in a relationship, to tell, make it open, make it official, versus keeping it secret. Yeah, it can be very sacred when you're keeping it secret. There's nothing wrong with that. um but yeah, exposing it, telling everybody else about it, that just creates an open window for others to possibly influence or throw their judgments and ideas and stuff into the relationship. Some people may be for you, some people may be against your relationship, but now you just opened up a door for all this criticism and all these external forces to come in. So just, yeah, keep that in mind. Okay, so I really cannot read anything else that I've written down. What I can read is Zoe Kruger, the cop killing her family. That was Dexter's mind evaluating, do I really want to stay with these people? Do I really want to stay with my family? Or do I want to kill them, basically? Now, the thing about Dexter is you want to like him as a protagonist, as a character. So whenever Dexter has any messed up, evil thoughts, those thoughts are actually manifested as the victims on the show that he kills. If you really pay attention to it, whenever Dexter has a dilemma, the one of the possibilities that Dexter has for dealing with his dilemma is usually represented through the killer and how they solve the problem. And Dexter kills that person to symbolically represent in his mind, I'm not going to do the same thing that person did. I'm going to keep myself in check. So Zoe Kruger was the reality of was the version of Dexter killing his family, basically. So having Zoe in the room, in the kill room, and him saying, I don't want to lose them, that was symbolic for, or yeah, Dexter killing Zoe was symbolic for Dexter killing that idea in his head that he would ever harm or kill his own family. Well, unfortunately, I cannot read the rest of those notes, but I can, but flipping to the back of the page, I have three more notes on this episode. Lundy versus Anton. Oh, what's on Lundy versus Anton is basically a representation of Dexter's humanity dealing with the reality of, do I want to have the relationship? Do I want to have this normal, happy life? Or do I basically want to have a relationship with my problems? Um, Dexter's adventure with Zoe, from an emotional point of view, is the same as Deborah going through her emotions with Lundy versus Anton. And the idea of being more committed to one's darkness and one's cycle of problems versus being married to this happy life that ultimately causes misery and is foreign. Um, so yeah, so that's the thing. Lundy also kind of introduces the cycle to Deb, which is bringing back the past, the cycle of her past, of her father issues. So, Deb dealing with her dark passenger, which is her father issues, and then Dexter with his dark passenger. Um, the cup that was broken, these kids made a cup for Dexter, and when Zoe got into Dexter's house, it was very important that Zoe got in Dexter's house simply because Zoe was a character that represented something so intimate to Dexter, which was getting to the point of murdering or killing his own family. So, because she was so close to that, it was important that she got into the heart space of Dexter, which was his home or his house. So, it was important that she got that close. The cup that was broken was basically the same dynamic as in season 3 when Dexter broke or messed up his hand and he bled on the wedding dress, which is Rita had this sense of purity about her, and then Dexter dropped some blood on her pure wedding dress. And now here we have this cup that was made from the kids, and it was broken. It has the handprint, really showing that, hey, this darkness that is with Dexter is slowly infiltrating his most sacred pieces of light. And at the end of the day, he will never be able to balance these two forces out, because the darkness will always find some way of corrupting everything good that is in Dexter's life. Um, so, yeah, the cup breaking was basically a reminder of that. Um, so at the end of this episode, Deb decides to be with Lundy and choose the path of Lundy. And Lundy's like, okay, we'll go to Anton and we'll tell him together what you decide to be with me. Um, that dynamic is basically Dexter's humanity, or Deb, choosing not to really be not to really be with the family, but to choose to be. She basically chose her dark side when she chose Lundy. She chose to be in a relationship with her father issues, which is what which is basically represented through Lundy's character, which Lundy's character represents cycles and the past. So when that happens, Deb chooses the path of father issues and cycles. So when she chose to stay in that cycle, and when she chose to be in that cycle of having father issues and being with an older man like Lundy to replace her father from her father issues, um, when she chooses that route is what manifests her broken inner child, which ultimately shoots Lundy and her. If Deb decided not to go that route, then everything probably would have been fine. But the fact that Deb chose the route of the broken father figure, and the fact that she chose to be in a relationship with her cycles and her pain and her father issues and her PTSD, that choice is what manifested the person who shot her, which is Christine Hill, which is the character who represents the neglected, broken, uh, young inner child, uh, young, broken, human inner child, is what her character represents. So, Deborah decided not to move on from her pain, but to be with it. And when she chose that path, then she chose to manifest Christina. But yeah, so that's how that episode ends. I'm trying to get through this as fast as I can. I'm 43 minutes in. That is crazy. Anyway, episode 5. Not even halfway done with this season. And I did all 12 episodes this time. I have a few notes though, so I should be done within the next few 20, 30 minutes maybe. The next few minutes. Episode 5. Um, yeah, Anton equals life changes and living a normal life. Um, yeah, so see, Deborah and Dexter feel a strong sense of guilt in this episode. I would have to rewatch the episode to correlate what scenes the guilt was mainly in. Um, and then at the end of this episode, Deb says, "It doesn't matter what I do, I'm what's wrong, and I hurt everybody around me." Um, yeah, you see that being played out in Deborah's character and Dexter's character. That no matter what they do, people around them for some reason always gets hurt. And there's usually because there's a sense of darkness that lurks. Same as how in season three there was the Skinner. Every time Deb talked to somebody, a witness, they ended up getting skinned, being killed by the Skinner. And Dexter and everyone who gets close to him dies. So this was a pinnacle moment of it doesn't matter what I do, I'm what's wrong. So yeah, this and with Lundy representing cycles, it makes perfect sense why this scene actually correlates into creating the cycle of Trinity and Harrison at the end of season four. But the speech that Deb gives right here is the same thing that Dexter said at the end, meaning that Lundy is bringing a cycle into their lives, cycle of their darkness and repetitive pain back into their lives. Episode 6. And make sure I'm still recording. Yes. Let's see. The career-ending consequences when they got married. Now Dexter's really trying to force things to be together, force his sides to be together when they're not. It's not working out. So Matthew says, if this is not right, if they're lying, there's going to be severe career-ending consequences. Um, So now, yeah, Dexter's righteousness and his authority, he's really trying to force these two concepts to, come together. Um, Toward the end, um, Dexter was talking to Trinity, our boy Arthur, and he said, Arthur, how did you make your relationship work and everything? And Arthur said, I realized that the only way, you know, things were really going to work out in life is if I jumped in with both feet. And that is true because whether something works out or not, always got to remember that whatever, however much of yourself you invest into a situation is how much of yourself is going to evolve from that situation. If you only put 10% in a situation, then only 10% of yourself is going to benefit from that situation or evolve from that situation. If you fully put yourself into a situation, then your full being is going to somehow transform or be transformed or evolve from the situation if you fully put yourself in there. It is important to have a strong sense of will and to really know who you are, though, at your core. So that way, when you do jump in with both feet and you do have full faith in whatever it is, whether it's being a family person, being in a relationship, whatever it is, when you jump in with both feet and you go all in, then it's important to know that once you're in there, you will be able to have the willpower to keep the better parts of yourself intact. You don't have to be on guard. You don't have to be worried. You don't have to be scared. You just have to trust that when you fully go in there, that the trueness of who you are is going to be there at the end of this journey or at the end of that jump. All right, episode 7. Dexter is trying to find activities for the children, and Arthur says they're children, make them do it. As parents, it's our job to push our children out into the world and make them self-sufficient. Yes, very true. Um, from personal experience, yes, that is true. It is very important to teach your kids and children how to be self sufficient, how to be able to take care of themselves, and properly motivate them into being the best version of who they are. it can be a little tricky when you have a smart child, or you look at your child as if they're smart. If you look at your child as if they know what they're doing, and you have faith that they will make the best choices for themselves, that is good. It's okay to see that, but it is very important that you communicate with them and you do keep pushing them in certain ways. Don't wait until they're too old. Yeah, yes, if they are too old, see what you can do, see how you can talk to them. But it is important to really teach your children how to be self sufficient. And it is very important to sort of nudge them or push them into the right direction in life. It is important to know your child, though. If you have a child who has a very unstable sense of emotion, well, if you try to push them, then you are going to terrify that child simply because they don't know how to have faith within themselves. And if your child doesn't know how to have faith within themselves, when you try to push them, that child will feel unsafe and they will feel scared. They will feel like they have no sense of security. They will feel so alone. And you will ultimately cause this child to destroy themselves internally, emotionally, and mentally. The child will end up just hurting themselves. And they will not do it on purpose, but they will do it as a coping mechanism. So it is important that you understand your child and you talk to them and you figure out what is the best way to get to them and the best way to help push them out into the world and teach them, hey, you will need to know how to take care of yourself. I am going to die one day. I'm not going to be here. But also at the same time, your children have to be the masters of their own destiny. And only they know what their destiny is. Only they know their limitations. Only they know their strength and what they are capable of in this life. And it's important. It's important to teach your children how to honor that about themselves. How to honor that about themselves and how to be honest with that. And just keep your child strong enough have to have faith in themselves. Sorry about that. Yeah, so encourage their outside interests is also what he said. If they have a hobby, support them in their hobby. Don't just support them. Don't say anything like, "Oh, that's what you want to do." You're not going to do anything special in that field. You're not going to make any money there. Just support their interests, and just know that that's what's really important is that you support them. And yeah, when they do that, they will trust you more, and they will have more faith and more confidence in themselves and what they do. To dive into a little bit of the lore now, um, there was a scene that regards doing the best you can with the tools that are in front of you. I would need to rewatch the show to see exactly what scene that correlated with. But I guess that note maybe speaks for itself. Whatever tools you got in front of you, just do the best you can. I believe this might be the episode with the deer when Dexter had to go with the deer, had to kill the deer with Arthur. Um, this episode also, episode 7, also was with Pharaoh, John Pharaoh, when he was taking those inappropriate pictures of women and photoshopping it, and everyone was like, "Oh, Pharaoh murdered these women," and Dexter ended up killing Pharaoh. But it turns out it was Pharaoh's assistant. There was a huge foreshadow there for season 5 with Cole, and I believe it was Cole and Jordan. Um, and the whole thing, and yeah, the foreshadow seed there is the fact that Pharaoh being involved with being violent toward women and doing things, um, the fact that Dexter tried to kill that person and he didn't, he ended up getting the wrong person. Well, the person who did do all those horrifying things to those women ended up getting arrested, which means Dexter never killed that part of himself. It just got locked away. So that part got locked away, and then Dexter's guilt kicked in. In season 5, that guilt, reconnecting with that guilt, uh, allows Dexter to reconnect with that bar, with that cell, and unlocked it, which means Dexter re-unlocked the seed of this force that brutally hurts and injures women as a form of artistic work that manifests into the character of Cole Harmon and the Barrow Girls murders. Anyway, to move on from that now, just a little piece of lore there. The last note that I wrote for episode 7 was Dexter is getting his priorities mixed up simply because he's bonding more with his innocence. So now that Dexter's bonding more with his innocence and he's more on that frequency, no, now his dark frequency isn't as potent anymore. So now everything's kind of thrown out of balance now. So now Dexter doesn't really know how to balance out his life because now that he's more connected with his innocent side, the dark side is not really, his priority or his focus. So now it's kind of, going off the rails a little bit and kind of getting out of place, which is the dark passenger. This then goes into episode 8, which was Cody and Quinn kind of questioning Dexter and telling Dexter, "Hey, um, one kid got punched out by Cody," and Cody was like, "Someone said that they saw Dexter leave the camp because he was scared or something like that." And Rita was like, "Oh, one of the kids said that they saw you leave the camp," and that was a little suspicious. That was Dexter going more towards his innocent side, and now Dexter is not wanting to keep his mask on anymore. So now that Dexter's mask is slipping off, now he's starting to leave himself more vulnerable and open. So now you see that in Quinn being more suspicious of Dexter because now more of that open innocence is starting to come out now, which doesn't have any, psychological barriers or walls. This episode also talks about guilt. There is guilt that reunited Maria and Angel together. There was also guilt that helped Deb, or Deb released her guilt through opening up in this episode. I forgot exactly who she talked to or what she did, but I do remember something along those lines. And also, Trinity released his guilt by connecting with Dexter and telling Dexter, "Hey, this was the house that my family was in. This is where my sister fell. This is where my sister got hurt." And he talks about the bathtub and everything and how Trinity's cycle got started and how he felt guilty for scaring his sister in the bathroom to where she cut herself and ended up bleeding out and dying. So this show really did talk about guilt and what it meant to really open up and just release some guilt that just gets a hold of you, and it is important to let that out. Otherwise, you will not be able to fully open up your heart towards those who deserve to see it. Going to episode 9, the only thing I wrote was about traditions. This might be the Thanksgiving episode, which is one of my favorite episodes. An episode that I watch every year on Thanksgiving. Um, Traditions are very important. It teaches us where we come from. It reminds us of who we are. A lot of times when people don't understand traditions, they look at it as if it's a bad thing. I've talked to so many people who look at the traditions of holidays from Valentine's Day to Thanksgiving to Christmas, and everyone sorry, and everyone's like, "Oh, I hate these holidays. I hate them because they're like this or like that, or why do we have Valentine's Day? We should be showing our spouse that we love them every single day." It's like, but do you do that? Do you do it? That is a choice that you have to do, that you can do for yourself. You can show your spouse that you love them every single day. There are many people in the world who all the time who show their spouses and loved ones all the time that they love them, and almost every other day, once a week, is a Valentine's Day. Valentine's Day is just a day where we can collectively, as a tribe, as a community, as a country, really celebrate something beautiful together. Same as all the other holidays. There's just something beautiful about it. But a lot of people see the negatives in it, and this is where this holiday came from. The holiday came from this. Like, yeah, but you have to also understand that we're celebrating the evolution from that. A lot of these holidays have been well, a lot of these holidays that we celebrate are to celebrate the fact that we have moved on from such hardships, from such carnage, from all that bloodshed, from all of that selfishness, from all that pain, all that death and all that pain, just all the dark stuff. So these holidays have been created to really show, that we've moved on from such dark stuff. And for some reason, people want to hold on to the dark thing that happened and say this holiday represents this dark thing. It's like, no, the holiday represents evolving from that dark thing. Same thing is when it comes to birthdays. Some people say birthdays are narcissistic. Why do you want to celebrate another year of your life? Some people celebrate their birthday because they've been through so much and this is where they're at now. Some people actually celebrate the future of their birthday. They say, I am this years old, and this day, this moment, this celebration on my birthday is the start or the seed that's being planted in me. So now the rest of this year is going to revolve around the celebration that happens today on this day, which is my birthday. And that's going to be this one year. Some people do that. Some people use their birthday to celebrate what they are going to do for this year. So, birthdays can mean so much, so many different things to people. So it is important that you keep traditions alive, to keep family aware of why things are important, why things are put in place in the first place. If you do not do that, then especially children, people are going to lose sight of what's important, and they're just going to look at things like they're bad. They're going to look at things like, why it's like, why are our gender roles are terrible. Gender roles are bad. Forget gender roles. They're awful. They're destructive. Whereas some traditions use gender roles to say we honor the male and everything that the male has to offer, from the natural sense of emotion, the natural sense of the mentality, the natural sense of spirituality, and the natural sense of physicality that the male has. And the same thing for females, for women. There are certain abilities and gifts. Women have certain emotional strengths. They have spiritual strengths. They have mental strengths, and they have physical strengths. And what we do is they've created a system that honors each individual for what they have to offer naturally. And then they've created these things called gender roles. However, as time went on, people lost sight of that, and it's changed over the years. So if you do not know how to keep traditions up, then after a while, traditions just get watered down and then they eventually get seen as being bad. When really these things, traditions, are meant to honor the best and better parts of humanity and us and our histories and where we're coming from, and to help us not forget about how we connect to something that is much bigger than us. But once we start looking at traditions and we start bringing it down to our personal understanding, then we start to hate it. Then we start reprogramming what these things represent. And then we start thinking that our feelings are absolute truths to what these things mean. And then they get seen as negativity. And then we lose connections to higher parts of what make us human, what make us more intimate. All right, anyway, moving on to episode 10. Yeah, so Dexter tells Jonah, Jonah, where is your dad? I need to find him. And Jonah's like, no, I can't tell you where he's at. If I tell you, he'll kill me. And Jonah says, it's a, Dexter says, hey, Jonah, it's an ugly world out there. It's a mean and bad, ugly world. And the bad stuff doesn't just stop at your doorstep. It's up to you to break the cycles and break the cycles of the sins of your father. And so when that happens, Jonah finds the courage to break the cycle that his father could not, which is to stand up and do something to retaliate against his father's abusive nature. Um, Jonah's character in the show Dexter represents breaking cycles, which is why he comes back in season 6. But we'll talk about that whenever I do season 6. Um, so yeah, the bad stuff in the world doesn't stop at your door, meaning that when you see all the horrible stuff going happening and going when you see all the horrible stuff going on in the world, just know that those horrible things aren't always out there. Sometimes they're inside your home with the people that you live with. Sometimes they're inside of your heart. And that pain that you feel in your heart, those prisons that you create inside of yourself, and you call them safe spaces. You say, I'm going to put these walls up to protect everyone, to protect people from hurting me, when really all you're doing is just locking yourself up. That's all you're doing. You're creating prisons for yourself. Um, the bad stuff doesn't just stop at our door. The bad stuff is inside of us, and it is important for us to understand that and face ourselves and face the monsters and the demons that we need to in order to move on in a healthy way. Um I believe this episode 10, I believe it was Lost Boys. I think I could be wrong, but what I do remember is Dexter, I believe somehow Dexter reclaimed his innocence, and I guess somebody got arrested. It might have been Christine, but in this episode, Dexter somehow reconnects with his innocence by reconnecting with childhood, somehow reconnecting to his childhood self. And that goes into episode 11, which I believe was Lost Boys. I believe so. I can't remember if it's episode 10 or 11. Yeah, yes, I believe it was episode 10 was Lost Boys, because I think season episode 11 was Hello Dexter Morgan, And then whatever. Anyway, so in episode 10, I believe, so this is when Dexter had to go find that kid. So Dexter going through this episode and eventually finding that kid, Scott, who I wonder was named after the producer of the show, which could be a coincidence. Yeah, there's only so many names you can use for a show. So in this episode, Dexter finds this kid, and at the end of it, saves him and reconnects with his innocence. By saving that kid, Dexter is able to reconnect with his innocence. So by reconnecting with his innocence, that actually allows Dexter's humanity to reconnect with the broken piece of his innocent soul. That broken piece of his innocent soul manifests as Christine Hill, which manifests the conversation Christine and Deb has. So a lot of times when people go through this thing called a soul retrieval or a soul reconnection, whatever you want to call it, whenever a traumatic event happens or something devastating happens, a piece of a person's soul actually breaks apart and their soul ends up getting lost or whatever. So, whenever there is a type of soul retrieval and that soul reconnects with a person, whatever damage or hurt or pain was attached to that piece of the soul actually ends up reconnecting to the whole, or us as a whole. And what happens is when we reconnect with this innocent part of us, we'll actually notice that a lot of old pain will end up coming back as well. It's because that part of our soul that broke apart still carries that pain. Us just being the whole, just disconnected from it. I took a whole, actually took a class on this, a whole spiritual class, um, on this, and I had to learn how to do it myself. But it was it was a shamanic thing, a Native American spiritual thing. But anyway, so yeah, this episode, Lost Boys, does talk about soul retrievals and Dexter refining that part of his soul. So now when he reconnects his innocence, he basically reconnects his humanity with that broken piece, which was having father issues. So now that is what causes the conversation of Deb and Christine. And then we all know how that conversation ends. um, let's see, episode 9. Um, yeah, so now we're on the final episode, episode 12. And this episode 12, um, Deb agrees to meet with someone. I believe that was Christine. But anyway, when Dexter is put in the cell, the cage or the prison cell really represents, well, I can't really say too much on what the prison cell represents because I believe there were 3 instances in the show, or 4, when Dexter is actually in the cell. When Dexter is actually in the jail cell. It's in this episode when he gets arrested and he's in there talking with Harry, and Dexter and Harry have this deep conversation, and Dexter says, I don't want my dark passenger anymore. I don't want him anymore. I want to just live a happy life with my family, and I want to be rid of the dark passenger forever. I don't want it anymore. Dexter being in that cage really is a very powerful, sense of character development. It really happens in these jail cells. I believe the second time this happened was in the last episode. The next time this happened was in the episode when Dexter was with Saxon. The next time was in Dexter New Blood when he ended up killing the innocent person who was the cop. And after he killed that innocent cop, he stole his keys to get out of the cell. Um, so yeah, whenever and in that same scene, that's when Deborah shows up in the jail cell, and then Dexter has a full-on conversation and decides to shut down his humanity. So that was an interesting parallel. And Dexter, and he talks to Harry and tells Harry, "I want to be done with the Dark Passenger." But in New Blood, Dexter shuts down his human side and says, "I'm done with my humanity. I'm choosing my dark side." And then he ends up killing an innocent, and then we all know what happens at in New Blood. Um, yeah, so I did mention that there is an uncontrollable dark force that is that is kind of implemented in this episode when Deborah accepts Dexter for his secret and him being related to Brian. I won't get too much into that though because that gets into more of a demonic territory. And this season of Dexter really does get into the idea of demons and demonic forces influencing in such various ways. Season 4 of Dexter, especially toward the end, does kind of get involved in certain spiritual ideas and concepts that aren't very visible unless you know what to look for, unless you're so in tune with the spiritualities that you can see how these have been implemented in certain ways throughout the show. I don't want to get into all of that right now though, so I won't talk about that note. And the last thing, Dexter killing Trinity actually symbolizes Dexter killing the idea of family, which happened with Rita and Harrison, and the cycle continues. But the whole thing about Trinity is he would have never been on the radar if it wasn't for Lundy. If it wasn't for Lundy showing up, Lundy introduced um, the demon, this demonic cycle of the past into everyone's lives. So yeah, if Deb or Dexter's humanity actually chose to reject Lundy, then Lundy's files wouldn't have been grabbed by Dexter. There wouldn't have been a personal debate, and the whole Trinity situation would have never happened, which means Rita would have never happened, and then Harrison wouldn't have had his Dark Passenger. So yeah, Lundy. Anyway, that is my review for season 4. It's midnight, and unfortunately, I do have a big day tomorrow. I have work tomorrow. But you know what? This is like the only time I have right now to record. So if I'm up for it, I'm going to record season 5, see how far I can get with that. But yeah, I was hoping to do a lot more recordings today. Thank you for listening to this season 4 of Dexter, Family and Cycles. Have a great night, and take care of your family, love your family, take care of yourself, and learn to be the best version of yourself you can be for your family. Thank you, and have a good night.